It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.
Welcome to the mother of all talk shows, coming to you from the Russian Cultural Center in Beijing, capital of the People's Republic of China. How's that for a birthday show? Well, the USS Abraham Lincoln is floating away out of Asia like all other American aircraft carriers in a sea of excrement, humiliation, and defeat. The Islamic Republic of Iran has seen them off, but they may very well be back. What fiendish plan does Donald Trump have next for rescuing himself from what is surely penury in the polls in November in the midterm elections? And the Russian advance speeds up Kupiansk. It's finally decided which side of the line it's going to be on. And the Russian jewel of Odessa is coming very firmly into view as one of the war aims. And in Lebanon, the slaughter continues. More than 4,500 people have been killed. Tens of thousands have been maimed or rendered completely homeless, and well over 500,000 have been tossed into refugee status on the streets of the capital, Beirut. It's all coming up here tonight on the mother of all talk shows. Stay tuned. It is a remarkable thing. I spent the afternoon at the summer palace of the emperor in the capital city of Beijing, and I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about it. Not because it was the worst colonial atrocity, alas, very far from it. Not because it was the worst crime committed by colonialism against China, again, alas, very far from it. But it was something to see in concrete reality. The total destruction of the palace of the head of state of the ancient China, that China of ancient treasure, which was the center of the world when my people were painting their faces blue and living in the forest. Where China, when the Russian diplomats first arrived in China, and they were the first to arrive in China in the late 1600s, China had stone bridges, stone buildings, stone roads. It was the richest place in the entire world, and it cared nothing for the world outside and certainly did not kowtow to foreigners. This was completely intolerable for the rising European colonial powers, principally in this case France and the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. They simply could not accept that China was better than them, richer than them, more advanced than them, more civilized than them. And so they did everything they could to destroy it. And somehow, emblematically, the destruction of the Summer Palace in 1860, not ancient history now. We're not talking about the dim and distant, barely visible through the mists of time. No, in 1860, in the reign of Queen Victoria, the British and French armies invaded China and set alight the Summer Palace of the Emperor, and then completely destroyed it. Scarcely one stone stands upon the other. Now, I'm no big fan of emperors or kings, nor palaces. And there's every reason why China has no king and no emperor today. But this was not a blow aimed at the emperor. This was a blow aimed at China as an independent and sovereign country. They did it because they could. They did it to teach China a lesson as a precursor to stealing China's land and looting as much of its treasure as they possibly could. And just in case there was to be any resistance, they pumped Indian empire, opium, heroin into the veins, into the streets, into the opium dens of China. And that's what it was all about. China had refused to allow its people to become addicted to British Empire opium, and so they were forced to by bombardment. And as compensation for stopping our assaults upon China, well, we helped ourselves to places like Hong Kong. I mention it because it's always worth reminding ourselves that empire is merely robbery with violence, extreme robbery and extreme violence, but also because I want you to understand how the Chinese people feel about being lectured by Britain and France on correct behavior, on the proper way for countries, civilizations to conduct themselves. When the Chinese hear themselves being lectured, ordered, browbeaten by Western countries that raped them, murdered them, drug addicted them, stole their territory, burned their cultural treasures, what do you think they feel about it? Now, I'm not often in Beijing. I'm more a Shanghai man myself. But when I am in Beijing, I stay in the same place that Keir Starmer, who followed me around China last year, you will remember, where Keir Starmer stayed. If I was the leaders of China, I would have dragged them to see the ruins of the Summer Palace, but the Chinese are far too polite and far too diplomatic to do anything like that. But just in case the British elite imagine that the Chinese people have forgotten these crimes, I've got to tell you there must have been 500,000 people today going round the ruins of the Summer Palace. It's part of the national patriotic education curriculum. Every person in China has to study it, and if they can, has to go and see it. This informs China's view of the world, as it would if China had invaded London, laid waste to the Houses of Parliament, Westminster Abbey, Buckingham Palace, and our cultural artifacts and treasures. If the Chinese had invaded us and stole our things, if the Chinese had invaded us and forced us to inject their opium into our veins, and then seized significant parts of Chinese territory and occupied it for a century afterwards, how do you think we'd feel about being lectured by China on human rights and on international affairs? Enough of that. It's just boiling my blood. I hate colonialism, you see. I believe that imperialism is invading other people's countries and stealing their things, or in the case of China, even stealing a part of the country itself. And it's my birthday. Flame grilling since 1954. I'm entitled to a bit of self-indulgence, surely. I celebrated my birthday watching the USS Abraham Lincoln limping away from the coastline of Iran. I say the coastline, but it was never more than 1,000 kilometers of the Iranian coastline, because it can't be. It's a giant floating coffin, or it was a giant floating coffin. Now it's a giant floating shithouse. That's right. The flagship of the US Navy is a sea of excrement. The toilets don't work. There's not enough soap for the 5,000 poor sailors dragooned into serving aboard her. There's not enough toilet paper. In fact, there's no toilet paper at all. The drains don't work. The laundry doesn't work. And the food rations are at one and the same time indistinguishable from that which is floating in the blocked lavatories, and also extremely, well, parsimonious in content. And when you look at Mar-a-Lago and the Roman Empire rations that are enjoyed by Trump's cronies in Mar-a-Lago every weekend, when you look at Trump on that glorious fairway, never forget that when asked by reporters this week if the men on the Abraham Lincoln, having been on board for almost 300 days without on land, had been away too long, he said, not nearly long enough. Or when Trump told a clapping group of SEALs behind him and in front of him, the ones behind him, by the way, intriguingly, were law enforcement officers, clapping every utterly absurd and obscene statement that he made when he told them that he had decided that he was going to add the Strait of Hormuz to American national territory, that the Strait of Hormuz in the Persian Gulf was henceforth going to be a part of the United States of America. They all clapped. What kind of people clap such a maniacal idea as that? Especially as the White House was forced to quickly reassure everyone 1 hour later that Trump had only been joking. If he was only joking, why were they all clapping? If he was only joking, why did he look so serious when he was saying it? It was not a joke. Trump meant it, just like he means Greenland, just like he means Canada, just like he means Panama, just like he means Cuba, just like he meant Venezuela, where daily he boasts that he has stolen tens of billions of dollars worth of Venezuelan national wealth. Now, older viewers will remember when I was campaigning that Venezuela's sovereign gold, inexplicably banked in the Bank of England, who does that? Be released to the people of Venezuela whose gold it was. The Bank of England refused. Well, now they have decided to return Venezuela's gold, but not to Venezuela. No, they're going to give Venezuela's gold to the United States of America, which will then decide how and with whom to disburse that wealth. Who will get the contract? Well, we already know. It'll be a Trump crony, if not a Trump member of the Trump family. The crime family will get their hands on Venezuela's gold long before anybody in Venezuela will. So Trump means it. The question, therefore, for the rest of the world is how long we're going to put up with this. Really, it is the primary principal question in the world today, how we shake off the shackles of the Israeli-American empire before it's too late, before that Israeli-American empire can destroy the world and everyone and everything in it. You know, God gave us such a treasure in this planet. I was on a lake today of such beauty that even at my advanced age, I almost shed a tear at the sheer beauty of the scene. God gave us everything that we could possibly need to live a happy, harmonious, peaceful, plentiful life. And look what we've done to it. We've put Donald J. Trump in charge of its destiny. Of course, he's no longer in charge of China or Russia or even India or even Indonesia or any of the BRICS countries. He's not in charge of these places anymore, as the fact that not a single aircraft carrier after the pivot to Asia of 2014 any longer remains in theory, but he is in charge of whether World War III destroys God's green planet or not. And that's our fault. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. We are ruled, almost all of us, by leaders so supine, so stupid in many cases, that we have put ourselves in a position where we are committing national suicide on behalf of Donald Trump and Joe Biden before him. I've said before, you know, if Jack Kennedy had appeared in front of me and asked me to do something, there might have been a fair chance he could have persuaded me to do it. But Joe Biden, Donald Trump, what kind of people allow themselves to be ordered around, to be forced to commit self-harm? Why would you do it? Why are you doing it? Why is Andy Burnham allowing Donald Trump to bomb Iran from English airfields? Why is Merz allowing German industry? You know how many car workers have lost their jobs in 2026, and it's only August. 144,000 automobile workers in Germany have lost their jobs, and the results of Porsche and many other top German brands are yet to come in. The deindustrialization of our countries has been driven by Joe Biden and Donald Trump. The energy crisis in which we are now gripped. What are you complaining about? Said Donald Trump. I will never apologize. Well, a guy that commits a crime against you and tells you he will never apologize, he deserves to go down to defeat the very next time you get the opportunity, which in the case of the United States is in November. What kind of rulers do we have? But what kind of people are we to continue to be ruled by people who will continue to be ruled by Joe Biden and by Donald Trump? The war in Ukraine is vaulting forwards, as I predicted to you 4 years ago. Now, I left school at 16. I'm educated at nowhere university. I worked with my hands, making car tires for Michelin. I'm the only guy you know that can make a Michelin ZX radial. Most of the political leaders you know couldn't even change one by the side of the road if they got a puncture. So I did not have the benefit of the expensive education that most of your politicians have had at your expense for the most part. But I told everybody on television and on radio that the sanctions policy against Russia would be the biggest boomerang in history, and it would come back, leaving its target virtually unscathed and smack us full in the face. I told you, when better educated people were lying to you, that Russia was going to lose this war against NATO over the dead bodies, 1 million of them in Ukraine. I told you that was a lie. I told you that this war could end only one way, in a Russian victory, which is fast and comprehensively turning out to have been the case. We've got some brilliant Americans on the show tonight. Please don't think that anything I say about America is me evincing hatred against that great people, that great country. Some of my best friends are Americans, and 2 of them are coming up tonight. Stay tuned. It's the mother of all talk shows. Let me say that you can listen to the audio-only version of Moats on our Moats podcast, and the numbers on that are going through the roof. Just search Moats with George Galloway on Apple, Spotify, Google, or whichever platform you listen to your podcasts on. In recent weeks, it's been the #1 political podcast in Benin, Jordan, the Gambia, Qatar, Jamaica, Ghana, Iceland, Malaysia, Singapore, Sweden, and the Philippines. #1 political podcast in all those countries. Truly, truly phenomenal. Do you know that BBC News has lost 40% of its audience in the last 2 years? It's official. And of course, that is the sensible thing to do. But to get people to tune in and change course and listen to a radically different point of view. It's even more difficult, but it's happening. And the numbers that we are racking up are now in their millions.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
A huge poll this evening, 30,261 votes already. Is Trump guilty of killing the Menab schoolgirls? You can answer yes or no on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, on the YouTube community poll, on the YouTube stream. And if you're watching on the YouTube stream, don't leave tonight's stream without subscribing to my channel. It will cost you nothing but help me a great deal. And if you're one of the advance guard who supports the show on patreon.com/George Galloway, there's a ballot box there also. Well, 98, 93, 95, 97, 98 have already found Trump guilty, but the quantum is important. Let's get 50,000 people declaring Trump guilty of that great war crime. If you want to call the show, it's toll free in the United States and Canada, +1 855 MOATS, MOATS, or 855 5066287. It's free of charge in Britain and Ireland, 0800 229 4411, and the worldwide number is 0044 203 966 2625. The Texas Rose, who I have missed, having not set eyes on her for far too long, is back. Rachel Blevins, journalist and political commentator, joins me again now after way too long an absence. Rachel, I hope everything is good with you. It's not good with your country, unfortunately. We have a situation where your president appears to have gone mad, telling the whole country, the whole world, that he was about to annex the Straits of Hormuz, getting roundly applauded for it, and then telling everyone, or his officials did on his behalf, that he was only joking. It's come to something when these are the jokes from the presidential pulpit, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. And a happy birthday to you. I had to come back just for your birthday show. And yeah, looking at the Trump administration, it's funny, isn't it, that not too long ago we had Joe Biden here and we were talking about how he was out of his mind. And then we get Donald Trump back and he's more out of his mind than ever. I think it's just wishful thinking at this point when he gets up there and talks about his hopes and dreams, which apparently includes just annexing everywhere in the world, right? He has taken the U.S. empire and its dreams to a whole new level. We're just going to come out and talk about all of the territory that he wants to acquire. And you look at the Strait of Hormuz and you go, if the U.S. could not just control it, but even open it up for a little bit, they would have, right? They tried to call on NATO. They tried to call on all of their allies to come in and to support this effort to force control of the Strait of Hormuz after the U.S. decided it would be a good idea to wage this illegal war of aggression against Iran, and then it didn't work out how they thought it would. And even NATO, even countries in Europe said, no, we're good, we're not going to get involved in that, which tells you quite a lot about how bad the situation is for the United States. And I can always tell when you look at the mainstream media here in the West where they stand and kind of how much fear they have about this, because CNN had an article out today saying that, Vice President J.D. Vance, he keeps moving the goalposts, that initially the U.S. went into this war against Iran talking about how Iran can't have a nuclear weapon and we have to go after the axis of resistance, right? No one can threaten Israel. Well, now when you look at J.D. Vance, he's talking about energy markets and concerns about making sure that oil traffic can be allowed to flow. So in other words, the Trump administration just wants to open the Strait of Hormuz, which was open and free and flowing before they waged this illegal war against Iran. And so it's interesting to see how the media, they're now presenting it to the public, because you also had the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal coming out and saying, oh, well, the Trump administration just wants to focus on the economic war, right? They think they'll have this indefinite naval blockade, as they're calling it, that they're going to keep all of the sanctions. They're never going to unfreeze Iranian assets, and that will just work for them. But we are coming up to a very important deadline now on the 17th of August, which is the end of this 60-day period under the Memorandum of Understanding, in which there were supposed to be negotiations to make a final deal to end this war. And the United States has told the entire world that they do not want to end their war against Iran. And I think that's why we're seeing Trump start to sound crazier than ever, because he and his administration are realizing that they have absolutely no control here. And if Iran wants to go on the offensive, if they want to carry out more strikes, if they want to respond to U.S. and Israeli aggression, which is still ongoing, they can do that. And there's only so much the U.S. can do to respond. And that does not include this so-called major attack that Axios and others in the media have been trying to put out there and really amp up, hoping that the U.S. would magically find some more munitions to make it happen.
Munitions and ships, you know, the British Empire poet Rudyard Kipling, it's the first use of the word jingo in a lyric. He said, we've got the men, we've got the ships, we've got the money too. We don't want to go to war, but by jingo if we do. We had money, men and ships then. The United States currently has no men, no ships, and no money. Its economy is in the toilet. Its ships, maybe we shouldn't mention the word toilet when it comes to its ships, and its men are mutinying. Some of them are trying to jump overboard and commit suicide. They've been at sea so long on this bloody war, pointless war of choice. How do the American people see it?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because I think we're finally starting to see some frustration here in the United States, and it's coming first and foremost from the families of the service members on board the USS Abraham Lincoln. And it really is shocking when you see these images and videos and really just stories coming out of this aircraft carrier, because the United States spends so much money on its military. You would think we have the state-of-the-art everything, yet here they are, they're relying on this aircraft carrier that is now in its 9th month at sea, over 200 consecutive days without going to port, and it is quite literally driving these sailors and Marines on board crazy. I mean, I think that the reports we've heard about those jumping overboard or attempting to are largely downplayed by a media that is now having to come out and admit that things are so bad here. And that's not even to mention what they've done to the military families who are now being told that they have to move to a different port, but they don't know where yet. They don't know when their loved ones are coming home. They're sending out the USS George Washington, hoping that that is going to somehow get everyone to shut up, right? That is what the Trump administration wants right now, is for the American people to stop talking about how bad the conditions are on this aircraft carrier. That's not even to mention the lack of just food in general. I was going to say nutritious food, but they're getting to the point where they're running out of basic staples, where the conditions on board this aircraft carrier are so hazardous. And that is really the picture of the U.S. empire, isn't it? They have all this money, they're talking about their $1 trillion defense budget, and yet they don't care about the people who are the ones carrying out this war for them. They could not care less about the fate of these soldiers at sea or what happens to them when they come back home here to the United States. the U.S. establishment, the U.S. government, they feel exactly the same way about the American people. And I know we're coming up to the midterm elections, but even when watching the Republicans versus the Democrats, we are reminded they all, the majority of them in Congress, they support this war, right? They support war against Iran, and they may have their own ways of going about it. You may have Democrats who are very critical of Donald Trump because that's what they have to do here in U.S. politics, but they support U.S. foreign policy. They support these endless wars. They support the ongoing proxy war against Russia, and they see nothing wrong with that. And that is the one thing I wish we saw more of here in the United States was Americans waking up and realizing that these two major parties in politics come together and they agree on U.S. foreign policy. And for as long as that happens, we are going to keep seeing more endless wars and more horrible treatment, whether it's of the U.S. military members that are deployed or the civilians on the ground in these other countries. Because that's another thing that we still have not reached the awakening, the come to Jesus moment, however you want to call it, of the American people realizing that their tax dollars are being used to murder innocent civilians overseas. It's happening whether you're talking about Iran or Lebanon or Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. The U.S. is guilty and has blood on its hands all around. And unfortunately, that's not something that's going to change with Americans going to the polls come November.
Well, a perfect segue, Rachel. The Sunday Times is reporting today in London that British drones were, for the first time, at least first time it's been acknowledged, were used to murder civilians deep inside Russia. The Sunday Times says these drones were used only to destroy oil refineries, but that's literally not even half true. These British drones were used to murder civilians in Russia. I don't know, because I'm not there, if the British people realize the magnitude of that revelation, but equally, Russia has now written to the United States and Turkey to respond to the revelation, if revelation it can be described, that the United States is still deeply involved in supplying intelligence, satellite communications for targeting purposes, munitions, and experts to the killing of Russian civilians in Russia, and that Turkey's plan to send a massive military ammunition and weapons shipment to the thief of Kiev, Zelensky, will seriously affect relations between Russia and the United States and Turkey, and God knows what they're going to do about this Sunday Times report about the involvement of London. So that's another pre-election promise broken, because Trump told us he was against the war in Ukraine and that he was going to bring it to an end. What do we say about that?
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, you look at the Trump administration, and we are reminded that they never really had a plan for ending the war in Ukraine, right? Trump seemed to think that he was going to get Putin and Zelensky in a room together, tell them to hash it out. He did not seem to have even a basic understanding of why there is a war in Ukraine right now. And exactly as you're describing there, the U.S. did not just wash its hands of this war and walk away. They are still directly involved. And they know that they're directly involved, whether it's the satellite data, the intelligence, whether it's this plot to spend 40 days putting pressure on Russia. I mean, how ridiculous is it that this is being branded as Kiev's idea, right? That they came up with this all by themselves and it wasn't the rest of NATO and the talking heads, whether it be in Britain or in the US, that are really making the plans here, thinking that they are going to put pressure on Russia. And yet what they're doing with these increased attacks targeting Russian civilians, or targeting, I know the big thing on social media is right now going after Wildberries warehouses, as if they think that they are going to hit the Russian version of Amazon and that is going to make the Russian people take to the streets and overthrow their government. I can't think of anything more ridiculous, but they think that they are going to get the images and videos of these big explosions. And when they put that out on social media and it's repeated by various media outlets, what they're ignoring is the fact that Russia has the best air defenses in the world. They're ignoring how many drones and missiles they had to send in order to get to that one explosion, how many were actually shot down. And they're also, of course, intentionally covering up how dire the situation is for Kiev right now. I mean, looking at Russian advances all along the front lines, that's one thing. But you look at Ukraine in this position where they don't have the manpower, they don't have the weapons. You've got Zelensky over here desperate for Patriot interceptor missiles, hoping that someone in the US will find some for him. And we also have to remember that those interceptors are not going to be used to shoot down Russian ballistic missiles because they can. It's just the hope that Kiev can try to have some control over its skies. It's the fear that Russia is going to move into some very powerful air dominance here, and that is going to not only look terrible for all of NATO, but signal a pivotal point in this war, because Russia is showing, Iran is showing that they are not going to back down, and that they are sick and tired of dealing with the United States that plays around and goes, oh, we just want a ceasefire, we just want negotiations, while plotting more endless war behind their backs. And I think we are getting to a very important point for the multipolar world as a whole.
Lastly, Rachel, it's wonderful to hear your beautiful voice again. The United States is facing really seminal elections in November. I can't think of a time in the midterms where so much was riding on the outcome. Now, you rightly made the point that the Democrats are no better than the Republicans, but they have the one benefit of not being the Republicans at a time when Donald Trump's opinion poll ratings are down to 33%, the lowest ever. In fact, the lowest ever recorded by an American president at this stage of his presidency. And so the Democrats, in many places, will be the only alternative to the Republicans, as much as we would like the Tucker Carlson, Thomas Massey, Candace Owens new third force. It's not going to be in place, if it ever is, before November. So what's your estimation of what the outcome in November is going to be, and what will that mean if it comes to pass?
Yeah, that's a good question, because as I've been watching this, I do think that, as is the case with a lot of midterms, right, you see the opposing party make more progress, just as in the general election, we saw so much support for someone like Donald Trump after 4 years of Joe Biden. That people said they didn't want more of that. They wanted the guy who was going to pledge to end the endless wars, to end the war in Ukraine. I mean, the guy who insisted we would not see more war in the Middle East. It's laughable now, just as it's sad. So I could definitely see Democrats making more progress in November. I'm curious to see how much foreign policy really plays a role and how much we start to see this war hit home for the American people. Because part of the reason that Trump has been able to continue this war is that he has been able to game the stock market now and to just make it look like everything's fine, right? At the same time, he's done the same thing with oil prices. We've seen the U.S. turning to their strategic reserves in hopes that they could just keep everything propped up. And to a certain extent, they have been able to do it. Yes, gas prices have come up here in the United States, but not really to the point that makes people start to freak out. The U.S. is almost in a way boiling the frog when it comes to the American people, in the sense that they are just gradually increasing prices at the gas pump and at the grocery store and hoping that no one notices how bad it's getting, even as wages are not increasing by anywhere near the same rate. And so it'll be interesting to see between now and November how the war in Iran really does amp up, right? If we see Tehran in a position where they decide to carry out even greater attacks across the region, obviously the US and Israel are likely to do exactly the same. I don't expect this war to come to an end anytime soon. And to see if that actually hits home for the American people, because I think right now one of the most dangerous parts about today's society in the United States is that there is so much back and forth of left versus right, and there also is for the Democrats. They can still write on, exactly like you said, they are not Donald Trump and they are not Republicans, so they can still play that card in the hopes that it will get voters out there, while at the same time voters have to come to their senses and realize that the vast majority of Democrats and Republicans are still supporting this war. And the ones who aren't, like the Thomas Masseys, they have been largely targeted by the Zionist influence, the Zionist money for sure, and that is still very prevalent in American society today. So just as we have a lot of concerns for where U.S. foreign policy is headed, that also comes back domestically. And I think we'll be seen when it comes to the number of Americans that go to the polls and ultimately who they vote for.
Well, looking at the primary results, I mean, I don't know them all, you will, but a huge number of AIPAC-supported incumbents have been defeated by challengers, particularly Democrats, but perhaps not all. And so supporting Netanyahu, supporting the crimes of Israel, isn't the winning ticket in US elections that it used to be, is it?
Yeah, it has been interesting to watch as we have seen some movement there. And just the fact that, this is the logical outcome of what happens when you support a live stream genocide, right? What happens when you go into these endless wars and you throw your support behind them. And that is my hope. If there is any hope here for the US and for politics here at home, it is that people start to wake up to the fact that, and I do think they are to a certain extent, but that they start to realize that this is not a society that we can continue to support. This is not a foreign policy we can continue to support. I mean, when Netanyahu is a wanted war criminal and he's still allowed to travel all over the world and he's welcomed as if it's normal, that goes right back to the United States and what they are supporting. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see the outcome and of course how tensions increase between now and November, because it definitely seems like we are on the road to it.
Rachel Blevins, as always, wonderful to hear you, to see you, and I hope it's not too long till you're back again. Rachel Blevins, journalist and political commentator, brings me to a quick break. Stay tuned though, your call's coming next. My grandson, Sean, who's answering the phones tonight, had his first 1 million view tweet about Gaza, and I predict great things from him. So we're not going to go away. We believe in the next life. We believe that we will all be judged on what we did in this life, and that will determine our fate. And so we face whatever we have to face, if not with equanimity. Can't say that the experience was one that one can feel sanguine about. It was genuinely horrific, and I'll never forget it. It was the more horrific for being unexpected by me. I never believed that someone like me, of my age and with my background and with my position in British politics, would ever be told that I was being held under the Terrorism Act. I'm not unmoved by it, but I'm certainly undeterred by it.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
A bumper poll: is Trump guilty of killing the Menab schoolgirls? Yes, 98, 93, 95, 97, 98. Well over 30,000 people have now voted. Have your say. And it's toll-free to call the show in the US, +1 855 50 MOATS, MOATS, or 855 50 66287. Free of charge in Britain and Ireland, 0800 229 4411, and the worldwide number 0044 966 2625. Comments on YouTube are flooding in. Sammy Gitt says bombing civilians, kidnapping world leaders, sanctioning half the planet and tariffing the rest, while lecturing everyone about freedom and human rights. Well said, Sam. And Bonsai88 says USS Abraham Stinkin. I think you'll find I'm the author of that one. Pauline Wooding says Zionist fascists trying to bring on the Gazification of the West Bank. Can't see any more of the comments. I'll need to get someone to move the page up, but we are waiting for the appearance of Jackson Hinkle, my political son, my protege, who has become one of the world's most prolific, most eloquent, and most perspicacious of commentators, and always a very welcome guest on the mother of all talk shows. I don't have any change on my screen. I'm hoping I will in the next couple of minutes. So let me tell you that very shortly you'll see a trailer of the deep dive into weapons that changed war that I did with Larry Johnson a day or two ago. I hope it's going to become a regular thing. We don't get the chance of deeply diving into the important issues of the day, so we're kind of taking it off the screen. Layla is in Boston on call. Let me go to Boston and talk with Layla. Layla, you've got me on my knees. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm calling because I'm concerned about the laundering of Tucker Carlson. He is he's really the main reason, one of the main reasons why Trump is in office. His racist rhetoric and his support of Trump through the years should not be forgotten. And he should not be someone that you should advocate for to be president of the United States. I think he's very dangerous. I think it's great that he's on the right side of history when it comes to Israel. That's great. You know, everyone hates Israel. We know that they are a fascist country. But he also advocated for the fascists that we have in office now here in America, and that should not be forgotten. And also, Tucker Carlson is very anti-Black. As an African-American, that really concerns me. So I think that when you talk about Tucker Carlson and Thomas Massey and Candace Owens, don't forget that they supported Trump until they didn't. And it's kind of too late. He's already out the bottle, and now he's been unleashed across the world. And, you know, they shouldn't, their role in that should not be forgotten or erased.
Well, I never forget anything. I have the memory of an elephant. I could tell you what crimes people committed, what blunders they made, what offense they gave 40 or 50 years ago. So I'm not asking you to forget anything at all. But the way you blithely dismiss the fact that Tucker Carlson is Israel's biggest enemy in the United States now, public enemy number one, as just being on the right side of history, as if that was nothing, is frankly astonishing. But if that was the only thing that Tucker Carlson currently was, that would be one thing. But Tucker Carlson is against war with Russia. Tucker Carlson is against war with Iran. Tucker Carlson is against war everywhere. Tucker Carlson is trying to avert World War III. That's not a small thing, Leila. Now, of course, you will remember, or in your words, you will not forget, slights or insults or political errors committed by people like Tucker Carlson, Thomas Massey, the black woman Candace Owens. Of course you won't, and I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to see the bigger picture. I'm asking you to try and help us avert World War III, which, if it occurs, will mean that any differences you have with Tucker Carlson are completely odious, will mean nothing at all. His views on DEI or his views on race when he was a commentator on Fox News, they won't matter a row of beans, because we'll all be dead. The world will end. And how many Palestinians will still be alive if the United States stays in the hands of the red, blue tie, uniparty, two cheeks of the same sagging backside? Will there be any Palestinians left? And if that matters to you, isn't that worth looking beyond the issues that you've got with Tucker Carlson? Well, it is for me. I don't know if it is for you, but I'm giving you the last word. Leila, back to you.
Yeah. There are other people besides Tucker Carlson we can advocate for that doesn't have his record. I am totally for no wars. I am totally pro-Palestine. I'm pro everyone against in the world. You know what I mean? All different colors, races, ethnicities, LGBTQI. I advocate for all of that. I am anti-white supremacy.
I'm sure you do. And before you told me that last one, I already guessed it. Tell me who. Tell me who, Leila. Who should we be advocating for?
I would advocate for Butch Ware. Butch Ware was the vice president candidate. Butch Ware, Dr. Butch Ware. He was a presidential candidate that ran with Joe Stein, and he was part of the Green Party. And I would advocate him for president.
And what chance has he got?
Well, he would have a chance if he would have a chance.
President of the United States. No, don't blithely pass that one by. What chance does he have of being elected president of the United States?
Let me answer you. he would have a chance if media would give him the same amount of time that they give the racist Tucker Carlson. If he got the same airtime and the same
But if my auntie
cheerleading that
had
Tucker
balls,
Carlson got,
she'd be my
then
uncle.
he would.
If my auntie had balls, she'd be my uncle. The media are not going to give the same time to Butch Ware as they would have to give to Tucker Carlson. Can't you see that?
And we have to ask the question, why wouldn't they? White supremacy, that's why.
Well, you can ask that question till the cows come home. But you already know the answer. They are not going to. And you know that they are not going to. So what you're doing is criticizing me for advocating for someone who can win the presidency of the United States of America, and arguing that I should in fact advocate for someone who can never be the president of the United States of America. Leila, that is the very definition of utopian liberalism. Thanks anyway for your call. Now let's thanks for those who donated this week. Here's tonight's top donors who've left a minimum of £1 or $1 or €1 in my hat. Paul Mahoney, Ellie Newt, Diana Saleh, Robert Rogers, and Rainier Lewis. Thank you very much indeed. Please do become a Moats donor tonight. Now, as I said, coming up is Jackson Hinkle. But here was me with an American legend, exactly the same age as me, Larry C. Johnson, ex-CIA. Here's what we talked about.
Yeah, I think right now the Russian drones, let's start with the first generation drone, it was probably 5,000. They've now got some jet engines on some of them, and so they're up to say 20, 25,000, but they're not prohibitively expensive, particularly when they're taking out targets that may cost $1 million. So.
I want to move on to their targets, Larry. I mean, I've seen them hunting down individual soldiers. It makes my blood run cold, I must say. But what they're doing now is they're hitting logistical hubs. They're hitting I've seen geraniums hit troop concentrations that are underground. I've seen them hitting railheads. I've seen them hitting factories. And now in Odessa, which is becoming a very interesting part of the war, was a sideshow, now is center stage. They're effectively imposing a blockade on the Black Sea coast of Ukraine. They've effectively landlocked Ukraine just by the use of drones.
Yeah, well, the combination of drones and the missiles as well that go out and attack these ships. It is... watching the evolution of this as we go back to 2022, and even in July, the assault on Mariupol that took place in May of 2022, drones really weren't a factor there. But by 2023, 2024, increasingly so. One of the most unnerving things you can see on social media is these drones will find a bunker complex, and they'll literally fly to the door and sit there and wait. And, they've got an operator behind them. And, they'll just drive the drone into the building or into that underground bunker, and boom. So, I mean, it is, if you go back and watch the Oliver Stone movie Platoon, in Platoon, they're being overrun by an attack by Vietnamese soldiers. And one soldier will run into the command center holding a satchel of explosives. Well, now you get to do that with a machine. You don't lose the soldier, you let the machine do it. And it's a way to really dramatically increase the casualties. It's a reverse. In the past, an attacking force usually had to have about a 3-to-1 advantage in manpower because they were going to take losses in attacking a fixed position. But now what's been reversed over the course of the last 4 years is that in attacking these fixed defensive positions, which are heavily fortified, the Russians soften them up with artillery. Then they hit them with these glide bombs that are enormous. And then they go in and finish them off with the drones. And so by the time a soldier walking on two legs actually gets to the point of attack, the threat has been dramatically reduced, which is in contrast to the lies being told about massive Russian casualties. This is why Russian casualties have been so few in comparison to those that have been suffered by the Ukrainians. And it's simply the disparity in firepower caused by that combination of artillery, fabs, and drones.
So what has been rendered obsolete by this rapid Russian development of the Iranian initial drone strike technology? I mean, large concentrations of forces, I get that, that's obvious. But ships must now be floating coffins. Tanks, are tanks now obsolete?
Yes, and it's they've become. I don't think they're cost effective anymore, because now Russia has just developed a system where they've got these canisters on board the tank that. And a system set up, when it detects an inbound drone or missile, when that missile gets within, say, 10, 15 feet, that canister detonates, sends out a shrapnel that destroys the incoming object. But the problem is you've got about 15, 20 shots from that. And once they're exhausted, they're done. So what we've seen is that these Russian tanks have resisted an attack initially of 15 drones, but then with the next 15 drones, it's vulnerable and it gets wiped out. So it really has reduced the effectiveness. Tanks have a much more limited role now than they did, say, 15 years ago or 10 years ago. So that's a whole new ball game, and I think we're on the way to seeing where spending literally tens of millions of dollars to build a tank that can be taken out by $50,000 worth of drones, it no longer makes economic sense. And then it goes back to, the drones can hit ships at sea, as well as the hypersonic missiles that you mentioned at the outset. That also eliminates aircraft carriers getting close to shore. Forget about that. So this, and actually, let's call the evolution between the drone and the hypersonic missile, it's just a matter of speed. What we're talking about is something that can be launched, can be controlled, and regardless of the speed, it creates a threat that causes the force being attacked to completely change its tactics, how it operates.
It's a fascinating interview. If you're interested in war beyond the headlines, if you're interested in how these new Russian weapons, these geraniums, Geran, have transformed the world of war and therefore transformed the world, then it's going live, the whole interview and video, on my patreon.com/George Galloway page at the end of this show. So if you want to see it early, if you want to see it now, then join my patreon.com/George Galloway. Of course, eventually it will be for general release, but it's only fair that the Patreon supporters get to see it first. We dealt with drones in this particular episode. We'll deal with hypersonic missiles. I mean, what is a hypersonic missile? We hear these phrases all the time, but not many of us, at least many of us, don't understand fully how that has changed everything. So you can see it on my Patreon page. Subscribe now, patreon.com/George Galloway. And a big thanks to Larry C. Johnson for his expertise. Let me take a quick break. No, who needs a break when Jackson Hinkle is on the line? Jackson Hinkle, US-based political analyst and the host of Legitimate Targets. Thank you, Jackson, for joining us once again. You're always a very popular guest and stand-in. I've got to thank you for your recent stand-in on the show. There's so much happening. Let's start in your home country of the United States. Is Donald Trump going to survive the current level of unpopularity, the current level of failure that his administration is recording, the kind of laughingstock which America has become around the world? The more he tells us how everyone respects him and respects the US, the more the whole world is laughing. And once they're laughing at you, it's quite difficult in politics to come back, isn't it?
Well, thanks for having me on again, George. The brilliant thing for Trump is if he ever finds himself in a pickle, he now knows he can hide out in the food cart, the beverage cart. And I think that the big problem here is whether or not America can survive for the foreseeable future. I mean, we, for the first time in 41 years, have zero oil imports coming from Saudi Arabia for a full month. First time in 41 years that's ever happened. And I guess for the oil executives in America, thank God that Trump kidnapped Venezuelan President Maduro, because as you and myself and many others predicted, that was the necessary step that the regime had to take before launching Epstein Fury, so they could safeguard our energy imports, because they knew that everything would be shut down effectively if they launched this large-scale war on Iran. But, you know, the overwhelming majority of the American people, I don't need to repeat this, but they oppose this war. They oppose what our government is doing. We all know that, you know, okay, they're giving us some red meat now in the United States with these democratic socialists, these ultra liberals, I think we should call them, who are getting elected, and they say bad things about Netanyahu. But as a whole, we know they're going to go along with the Zionist routine. We already know that these democratic socialists support war on Russia. So the real question is not whether Trump can survive. Obviously, if the Democrats get in the Senate, if they get in the House, there's going to be, if they get in the House, there's going to be impeachment proceedings for sure. But how long can America survive? You know, can we ever think of a situation as grim as America is right now, where no one believes in our government? We have tens of thousands of homeless people in each of our major cities, crime everywhere. I mean, I think that this is kind of what people expect will lead into the foray of civil war. Civil war won't be two conventional armies in the United States facing off against one another. It's going to be the breakdown of law and order. It's going to be general chaos. Life will go on, but there's going to be a substantial change, and I think that's where we're really headed.
I mean, I track mass shootings in America. There were 3 yesterday. There's one most days, but 3 in one day was exceptional, even by US standards. The whole ICE phenomenon, where a gang, really, of heavily armed thugs, they've just been given electric gloves that if they lay a hand on you, you immediately drop to the floor electrocuted. They have shot people in cold blood who almost always turn out to be Paka American citizens who had no right to be interfering with in the first place. Corruption in the White House and amongst the crime family of the Trumps and amongst the cronies, people like Lutnick, the next door neighbor of Jeffrey Epstein. The Epstein affair itself, long suppressed now, but bound to return. Nothing is surer than that the Epstein affair will out. We will know eventually who did what to whom in the Epstein affair. The economic situation that you talked about, the complete absence of confidence in the politicians, in the political class, absent the arrival of a new force, which I'll ask you about in a few minutes. But it's a grim prognosis that you've made, and I must say I share it. I wonder how many Americans realize how close to the eve of destruction they might be.
Well, apparently, judging from the photo that Trita Parsi just put out, apparently U.S. sailors on board the various warships in the Middle East understand how bad things are, and they're fed up. We see these photos. I don't know if you saw them before you went live, but the photos of, I think they were like warplanes on board some of the aircraft carriers, and they had a bunch of dust on them. And written by their fingers in the dust, the U.S. sailors are writing things like, "We are good goys for Netanyahu," "Netanyahu sucks," Operation Epstein Fury. They're writing this on board the ship, where just this week, at least 6 sailors tried to jump off into the middle of the sea to unalive themselves, where they're being fed this slop on a daily basis. You can't even call it food. Some of it kind of looks like food. Most of it doesn't. And they've been out there for 9 months. They said they were going to be out there for a few weeks, and they've had them out there for 9 months. And each and every week, the operation changes. One day, it's wipe out the whole civilization of Iran. The next day, it's regime change. The next day, it's we need to get the free-flowing, sailing of ships back to the Strait of Hormuz, as it was before we started this war. If CENTCOM commanders are warning about a mutiny on board the ships that are out to sea fighting right now as they risk their lives, some of whom are dying, as we've seen at the Mufaq Salti Air Base in Jordan, for Netanyahu, then we've got really big problems. We got way bigger problems than even the ones I just mentioned at home in the United States.
For sure. Now, tomorrow is the titular end of a titular ceasefire, of a memorandum of misunderstanding, disunderstanding. We don't know if he ever meant it, but he signed it. Moreover, he signed it in the Palace of Versailles, probably too dumb to realize the significance of that. Is the war about to begin again? Our friend, Professor Morandi, seems to think so. He's expecting a huge American escalation this coming week. Do you?
Well, Professor Morandi knows more than I do, so I will defer to his judgment. I also just have to agree. I mean, why are all these ships still in the region if we're not planning something? Why are these sailors out there despite the fact? Why are they sending in new ships? 3 new ships, if I understand correctly. Why, when they signed the Memorandum of Understanding, did they continue to deploy the Boxer, Amphibious Ready Group, and the various MEUs that they sent over to the region that were in Asia? Why did they do all of this? Well, I mean, this is exactly what we did in the lead up to the Vietnam War. The first operation we did was send a Marine Expeditionary Unit over to Vietnam, similar troop size, establish a forward operating base, and it really kind of looks the same. But the good news is Iran is prepared. Iran is more hardline than ever before. If there was any hope from Trump officials that they would get some reformist types in the Iranian government to listen to them and get the attention of the supreme leader Mojtaba Khamenei and bring about some sort of a capitulation to Trump in the United States, they were dead wrong, because now, as of this week, we have a complete restructuring of the Iranian military, of the IRGC, of the Iranian army, Basij. Everything has been restructured, and the most important decision-making body in Iran, which is the Supreme National Security Council, has a new addition, that being the former commander of the IRGC, Mohsen Rezai. He's like the most hardline guy in all of Iran, and he's also serving as the secretary of the Supreme National Security Council and the representative of the Supreme Leader. So the Supreme Leader is obviously far more hardline than his father was, because of the conditions that I think Trump created, because Trump killed his father, because Trump killed his entire family. So this is the byproduct that we all knew was a foregone conclusion. And Iran now is a position to say, we are not going to have any sort of strategic patience, as the reformists in Iran like to call it. Every single attack that they face, no matter from who, will be met with an immediate and very heavy cost.
Now, finally, this is the anniversary of the liberation of Korea in 1945. The Red Army and the Korean partisans liberated their country on this day, 1945, from 35 years of Japanese occupation, and an occupation almost like no other. Only China could say that they had a Japanese occupation as vicious, evil, and total as the Koreans did. The Red Army liberated the country on this day, 1945. Now, North Korea, the South is still a US colony basically, but North Korea, judged to be the most successful economy in the world last year, and an ally of Russia, is about to send, it's already sent ballistic missiles, but it's about to send perhaps 50,000 North Korean troops into what surely will be the last push in Ukraine. Well, if I was facing 50,000 North Korean troops, I'd be quite trepidatious. Is there any sign of capitulation on the Ukrainian side? Is there any sign of political disintegration amongst the Kiev dictatorship? Or are they going to fight this to the bitter end?
Well, we'll just say the past 40 days were not great for Ukraine. Zelensky had this grand idea that they were going to launch a 40-day pressure campaign of these terrorist drone strikes on Russia, and this would bring Putin to his knees and to the negotiating table. Obviously, that didn't happen. Obviously, what happened is, Zelensky, yet again, he poked the Russian bear, which is already extremely angry, and the response was deafening. So deafening that Ukraine, who used to at least come out and lie about how many of the Russian missiles they managed to intercept. Oh, we intercepted 39 out of 45 missiles that the Russians launched at us last night. They don't even report how many missiles are being intercepted because, frankly, I don't think any of them are. Zelensky has no means of fruitful communication or dialogue with the Trump administration to get the interceptors that they need or to produce the interceptors they need. And after they poked the Russian bear yet again, Russia unleashed the most of aggressive series of missile strikes that we've ever seen. And frankly, speaking as someone who's here in Moscow, people aren't worried about this anymore. I'm sure you've seen it when you've been here in Moscow. People, I think in the years past, they're always like, well, we can't go too hard on Ukraine because we have to be worried about what the West might do in response if we take that action. Now people here are done. They say, you violated every single red line. We've tried to be rational. We've tried to be restrained to the best of our ability, but it's over now. And if what you say is true, 50,000 North Koreans, I dare say I wouldn't wish that upon my worst enemy, but it's about to happen. So let's watch, and I'll get my popcorn.
Now, you're covering events in Moscow. What's the feeling running up to the Duma elections, which are next month? So only weeks away. Is there any sense of an election taking place? Who are the runners and riders? What is the likely outcome in your view?
Isn't that amazing? Russia's managed to have, two or three elections now in the middle of this war, but Ukraine can't manage to have one. I think that these are, I don't involve myself too much in the domestic affairs. I don't at all, but in Russia here, because I'm not Russian. But I will say, from what I've heard, I just generally ask people is obviously people feel very confident in the leadership of President Putin at this point, and he has his United Russia party. And I think that probably regardless of party, regardless of which coalition a given candidate finds themselves in, whether it's United Russia or the KPRF, which is the Communist Party of the Russian Federation, I think voters are probably by and large going to be voting for candidates who present a more aggressive, policy / rhetoric towards the West. That's obviously the biggest issue right now, alongside the economics in Russia. And I don't think people are going to be voting for candidates that are advocating for restraint and reform and future, pushes for dialogue and cooperation with the U.S. at this point.
Well, they have the option to. The court initially struck down the registration for the elections of the anti-war Yabloko party, but they appealed, and the appeal has been upheld, so they are on the ballot. But every other party, of course, supports Putin's presidency, but every other party wants the United Russia party of the president to take a tougher line in the war. This is one of the big fantasies of Western media, isn't it? That there's some Guardian reading LGBTQ plus supporting constituency in Russia that would like to sacrifice their people in eastern Ukraine. But the opposite is true in my experience. What about you?
Well, I think it's hilarious. I didn't see the news that the Yabloko, which I guess means apple, that's what the party's called, a brilliant name. It's called Apple Party. I think about Adam and Eve and the forbidden fruits, the apple, and this is some evil, Western-backed party in Russia. It's kind of fitting. But this Yabloko party, they, you talk to Russians here, and I have many in my life, and they say, Jackson, this party is being promoted by all of these people that are legally codified and identified as being foreign agents of the West who are no longer living in Russia. So it's kind of amazing that Russia said, okay, whatever, we already know that they're not going to perform well. We'll let them participate, I guess. So that'll be funny to watch how these results go. But every other party that has any, criticisms of the way that things are going in Russia is only critical in the sense that, they think that things need to go harder. And we'll see what happens. We'll see how the elections go. And we definitely have seen over the last 40 days that at least some of those concerns have been heard, because the strikes and there's a great video from the YouTube channel History Legends. He does great breakdowns on the war in Ukraine and other conflicts. But he just did a summary of the 40-day assault by Ukraine and how it completely backfired. And he's a very balanced individual, call out, balls and strikes on both sides. And it was just a complete failure and backfired, just like everything else they've done.
Yeah, it was a fiasco comparable to the Kursk fiasco. And I don't mean Hitler's Kursk fiasco. I mean the Kiev's Kursk fiasco. Invading Kursk, you get the headlines, and then you lose tens, maybe scores of thousands of your own soldiers being driven out again. And this 40-day sojourn has turned out exactly the same way. Sure, it killed a dozen children or more. Sure, it killed some old-age pensioners. Sure, it killed some workers in the mulberry or wildberry warehouses, killed some factory hands, but it didn't affect the course of the war one bit, except that it brought the bear out of its cage with increased ferocity. You wonder who makes these strategic decisions on behalf of Kiev. It can't be anyone with Ukraine's real interests at heart, can it?
I don't know who's advocating any of these people now. Who thought the war against Iran would be a good idea? Who thought that this 40-day Ukraine campaign would be a good idea? Who told Mohammed bin Salman that going to war yet again against the Houthis in Yemen would be a good idea after both Biden and Trump failed with more than 10 country coalitions to dislodge Ansar Allah from Sana'a, Yemen, the capital city? But here we are. We're watching it all unfold. And, you know, this is the United States. This is the country that thinks that despite the fact that we couldn't defeat the barefoot Taliban after 20 years, couldn't defeat, the barefoot Yemenis either, couldn't defeat the Iraqis, and now Iraq is effectively the security apparatus is at the helm of it is the Iranian militias in the country. And somehow they think that they can go to war against China. I mean, we're living in an absolute delusional state. I say that all the time, but it's crazy that anyone would look at this situation, these people that are employed at the Pentagon, these private security and research firms and think tanks that get paid millions of dollars to understand what's happening in the world and arrive at a conclusion anywhere besides what we all see it as, what your viewers see it as, what mine do, and what we can all just recognize with our own two eyes.
History repeats itself, Jackson. First as tragedy, second time as farce. Unfortunately, a lot of people have to leave their guts on the ground for these repeated farces. Jackson Hinkle, the one and only host of Legitimate Targets and good friend of the show. Thanks for joining us again. Let me take a quick break, then I'll be right back with your calls all the way up to Gayatri.
The airwaves. This savannah is a rigid dichotomy of fact and fiction. As vicious as the Twitter sphere, where the slightest misjudgment can spell being cancelled. One species rules over the airwaves through its ability to adapt and survive in even the harshest environments. The George Galloway. The top cat in these parts, it is mostly active on Sunday evenings in Britain and mid-afternoon in the United States. It seldom roars during the day. Most notable for its wide variety of headdress, it protects these parts from the mainstream media. You can catch this fine specimen on the mother of all talk shows. Don't pick a fight with it. They've been known to bite back.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Ten minutes left to vote on the poll. Is Trump guilty of killing the Menab schoolgirls? Yes or no? On Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, on the YouTube community poll, on the YouTube stream, or on patreon.com/George Galloway. There's a legend on the line. Clear the decks. It's May in Oklahoma. Welcome back, May.
Hi, George, my dear hero. Happy birthday. It just so happens that
Thank you, my dear.
You share a birthday with my daddy. He was a little bit older than you, but it's so nice to celebrate you both on the same day. Wow, there's a lot of news going on right now. My husband was telling me yesterday that one of the reasons the Navy can't get enough of anything for our sailors is they have reduced the number of supply ships by about a third. No, yeah, a third since the 1980s. So there aren't even enough supply ships to supply the ships. So obviously the planning is not just during Trump's period, although it's certainly been egregious, but it's been going on for a long time, as I think you and Larry kind of talked about when you were talking about weapons. Nobody 20 years ago sat back and said, gee, what if we use computers? I mean, the planning for our military is crazy.
You've only got a budget of $1 trillion plus per year.
Yeah.
And you can't feed your sailors. You can't, never mind feed them. You can't give them toilet paper. You can't keep the drains clear. They've got no deodorant, no soap. They've got no towels. The laundry is broken. On a boat that cost hundreds and hundreds of millions of pounds. It's the flagship of the United States Navy, and the sailors are trying to jump overboard and kill themselves because they've gone crazy. Cabin fever, stir crazy, because they haven't seen their families. The single ones have not seen a woman in 9 months. They haven't set foot on dry land. What kind of madness is this, May?
I agree. It's the madness of King Donald. And I hope, from what I'm hearing in the news, that people are finally coming to the realization that this can't go on much longer. He's not well physically, mentally, or if ever emotionally. And it seems like things are coming to a head, but then we've been thinking that for a while. So I don't know, George. All I can say is I appreciate you being here. I sure appreciate your guests, Rachel and Jackson. Jackson's amazing. I'm constantly amazed at how well he talks.
He's a young man, and he's a young man in his mid-20s. Rachel, I don't know what age she is. I wouldn't be so indelicate as to inquire, but I think she's in her 20s too. These are two fine young Americans. And then there's Larry Johnson, a fine old American like me. He's 72 any day now, if not already. So there's some really fine people in America, May, and you definitely are one of them. Thanks very much for all your kind words and all your support. I must now mention the situation of another fine American, a legend of the show, just like May, in Oklahoma. Erebos has become the voice of moats over the years. I don't know about you, but I personally love to hear his voice. For me, he's the Barry White of the show. And the content of what he says is so outstanding, so powerful, so devastating, that I'm always left regretting that we've run out of time. So he, as many of you know, has really multiple difficulties in the United States. I don't know to what extent I'm free to go into all of them, but he is stateless, homeless, and yet he is such a man. Stateless, homeless, of extremely precarious economic situation, and he can't always get on the show because he can't always get to a place where there's internet, where he'll be allowed to pontificate in his beautiful basso profundo. So we've started a GoFundMe for Erebos. It's modest in its ambition, $4,000 we're trying to raise. My grandson Sean and his fiancée Jaya have started it. Now there it is. $3,000. $3,000 is what we're looking for. And we've raised $408. It's a GoFundMe. I'm asking you to donate a few dollars or pounds by following the link on the screen now. You can also scan the QR code. It'll take you right to the right place. We very much value Erebos, and we think that we should try and help get him back on his feet. Kelly is in North Carolina, and I want to hear from Kelly. Go ahead, Kelly. What have you got to say?
It's EY.
I beg your pardon.
That's okay.
I beg your pardon, Kelly.
Happy birthday, George. You share a birthday with my daughter. I love that you're...
Thank you. Happy birthday to her, too.
Thank you. Yes. She's 22. So I love that you're talking about the third party, movement. And I wanted to mention something. I started in January, and we've now had 47 candidates on. It's called nopeasants.org. And yes, I did name that kind of as a play off of the No Kings AstroTurf operation that the Democrats rolled out. But it sort of happened as an extension from Candidates for Assange in 2024 that Matt Ho and I hosted, and there we had about 70 candidates come out and speak up for Assange and for civil liberties. And so I posted on X a graphic of the candidate pledge, and these are all issues they're all from polling. They're issues that the majority of Americans across all political spectrum agree on. And as you've probably heard, in the U.S. now we have 45+% of Americans are independent, and amongst Gen Z it's 56%. Yeah. So these are all the issues that all of the candidates that we speak to agree on. And tomorrow we have Larry Sharpe joining us, and in Libertarian. A couple weeks ago we had Shama Sawant and Sam Husseini. So these are people you would think are like on very opposite ends of the spectrum, but when you look at all of these issues that are on the pledge, no more war, freedom of speech and the surveillance state, government transparency, demilitarize the police, not defund, but demilitarize, election security, reforming our judicial system, environmental hazards, and healthcare, they're all in agreement. Now, if you don't mind, I'll say one more thing real quick. We're seeing, I think that the U.S. empire has seen that too many people are coming together on all of these issues, and particularly against Israel's takeover of like everything, the surveillance state, the military, all of it. And so now we're having like the fourth Red Scare, right? This is the one place where you can divide these candidates that we speak to, is the socialism versus capitalism debate. And so what we're trying to do is have constructive conversations about that topic, because there are, of course, extremes in both of those camps, and people seem to not be able to have conversations without screaming at each other. So that's what we're trying to do, and I'm very excited to have, it was great to have Shama Sawant on, and I'm very excited to have Larry Sharpe on with us tomorrow. It's 9 p.m. Eastern.
Well, wonderful. I mean, the more the better. The more opponents of empire and endless war and war against our freedoms and civil liberties, the better. And the more consciousness they can raise amongst the electorate, the better. But when push comes to shove in November and in the presidential election 2 years later, we're going to have to get behind candidates that we will not agree with in every particular, but that we can agree with in most of the most important things. And they have to be what we Roman Catholics call papabile. They have to be capable of becoming the Pope, capable of becoming the President. There's no point, as Layla did in Boston, in wishing that, John Doe, Butch Ware, George Galloway, or whoever could become the President of the United States. They can't. They won't. And therefore, you have to get behind somebody who is with us on all of the most important things, indeed the existential things. By which I mean the things that, if we don't solve, none of our points of view on anything else will be important in the least, because we'll all be dead. It's really that basic. It's really that simple. That's my view. Kelly, K-E-L-L-E-Y, in North Carolina, of the No Peasants Organization. Michael Crystal says, Menab 168, the measure of this U.S. administration's depravity in name and number. 168 little girls eviscerated in an instant by Donald Trump. D. Rogers says, BBC Scotland off the ball, mentioned Gigi's birthday on air today. Oh God, what did they say? Stop and listen. Sends $5. Happy birthday, Gigi. Always remember, never underestimate the evil power of Zionism. Gaza, Lebanon, and Iran are my witness. And DP 7.5 says nothing better on a Sunday than a bottle of soda pop and listening to George slag off neoliberal Zionists and the like. Okay. Toto O'Dale sends 10 British pounds. Thanks, Toto. Happy belated birthday, George. Can you wish my mother, Mary, a happy birthday? She listens to your show every Wednesday and Sunday. She shares the same birthday and year as your good self. Wow, that's a coincidence. Mary, God bless you. Many happy returns. May we all make 100. My mother's 91 now and headed for the century. Kobe is in Florida, in Saudi Arabia. Wants to talk about Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Pakistan. Kobe, welcome.
Hello, George. Happy birthday.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I just wanted to get your opinion on what you think this new alliance would do and how it serves the Zionist interests in the region mainly.
Do you mean Turkey, Pakistan, and Saudi Arabia?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not against it. I wish no harm to Saudi Arabia. I don't wish it to be destroyed. I love the people there. They love me. So if there's means by which Saudi Arabia can wean itself away from a grotesque overdependence on the United States of America, I'm all for it. It is the case that the United States have ripped Saudi Arabia off, and the other Gulf Cooperation Council states too. They demanded protection money and then didn't provide the protection. So for me, the United States as the guarantor of security for the Arabian Peninsula is a busted flush. And so I don't blame anyone for looking elsewhere. What I hope it will develop into is a pan-Islamic security framework, which will include Iran. After all, if NATO had decided to include Russia, we would have saved ourselves a lot of blood and a lot of treasure, but they refused to do so. And if this new defensive alliance is aimed at Iran, then that will have the same outcome and end as the NATO in its confrontation with Russia. So let's expand the Turkey, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia alliance into one that defends all Muslim countries, any and all attacks. Now, from where do most attacks on Muslim countries come? Well, a man like you, Kobe, already knows the answer to that. Big thanks. A mention now of this week's top donors. You really have been generous, but we need to keep the donations coming in. The show survives on them. On the wall of fame tonight, writ large as it is possible to write, is the Moats legend Donna Ross, Donna from Panama. This show would be in deep trouble without her. Albert Seud, John Yaka, Mark Blocker, and Andy Early. A big thanks to every one of you. All you have to do is go to moats.tv, our website, and click on the Donate Now button anywhere on the site, or scan that QR code on the corner of your screen now and you'll go right to it. Kane is also in Florida on the Iran war. Kane, welcome.
Good evening, George. And again, happy birthday.
Thank you.
This whole Iran and U.S. conflict goes into everything. My wife, who is a actual current Navy sailor, who has actually been stationed on the Abraham Lincoln, has told me about even the horror stories that she's even had to endure with, just from having to wash clothes in the lavatories, in the sinks, and to, like your guest had mentioned earlier, with the poor conditions of the food and everything. It's absolutely atrocious. And yet this man sits here, is mentally, quote unquote, sane enough to say, oh no, they need to be out there longer. No, it's absolutely wrong. Yeah. It's cruel, and it's just absolutely vindictive. Because like you had mentioned earlier, both these men and women U.S. sailors haven't touched the ground in almost 9 months when they were only supposed to be there for a few weeks. Like how can you do that to somebody? It's just absolutely inhumane.
Well, that is a very powerful piece of testimony, Kane, and I'm sorry your wife is enduring that. And I'm sorry too, because I didn't realize that there were women on board the Abraham Lincoln, so I recant one or two of the rather risque points that I'd made earlier. But the state that they are all in after 9 months without touching the planet Earth can only be imagined. Running out of the most basic foodstuffs, long run out of the most basic hygiene products, long run out of decent toilet and shower facilities. Now this is in a $1 trillion plus military budget, and it's a result of grotesque incompetence on the part of Hegseth, the so-called Secretary of State for War, but it's also on account of the fact that the United States bases in the Gulf have been decimated, they've been destroyed. So once upon a time, that carrier would have been being supplied out of Bahrain, but nothing called the United States any longer exists in Bahrain, at least above the ground. They cannot operate in Bahrain because the same Iran that Donald Trump keeps telling us he has 47 times defeated already pulverizes anything that moves in the U.S. naval facility in Bahrain. Last word to you, Kane.
Thank you, sir. I greatly appreciate it. And if I may, to add one more thing and stuff, I think it was either you or some other guest that you had on, and they were talking about, the Republicans and the Democrats and saying, like, oh, one needs to take care of this one and so on and so forth. Well, in my personal opinion, and this is, I'm sorry if it gets kind of in conspiracy theory territory, but, just having family members that were prior Freemasons and stuff, I know Trump is a Jesuit / Freemason. And if you know, or if any of your listeners know any quote-unquote real history, that yes, the Roman Empire quote-unquote never fell as everybody said that it did. It just evolved into the Vatican, in my honest opinion. Because if you think about it, here in the United States, they talk about elections and stuff and everything. You don't really necessarily have a choice of elections, because it doesn't matter who you vote for, because the president is serving a quote-unquote higher power or a higher authority. They don't serve the people of the United States of America. No, sir, not at all.
Well, that much is true. And as to conspiracy theory territory, I'm afraid there's not much of that territory left, because almost all of the conspiracy theories turned out to be fact. But I don't endorse that one. I actually believe that Donald Trump is Jewish. I believe that Donald Trump, under the Chabad, converted to Judaism before his first presidential run. And I have a number of reasons to believe that, but it's too late in the night now to go into them. I certainly don't believe he's any kind of Jesuit. Whether he's a Freemason or not, I don't know and wouldn't know. But I think that Donald Trump is totally compromised by his relationship to the Israel lobby, the Zionist lobby. Whether that compromat gathered painstakingly, no doubt, by Jeffrey Epstein over decades, or whether financial compromat, whether religious compromat, I couldn't say. But everything that I have seen persuades me that if anybody is leading Donald Trump, it sure ain't the Vatican. It's the legend himself. Erebos in New York joins us before Gayatri comes in. Erebos, welcome back. Glad to see you. Hope your ears weren't burning as I talked about you earlier. Erebos in New York, what have you got for us tonight?
A warm and salubrious, fidelitous, and vivificacious birthday, born day to you, the future Prime Minister of the would be, in my view, great United Kingdom, Great Britain. Shout out to you, and thank you for all the much kind words and support. Jai the Magnificent, first of her name, has become my agent and representative on Earth. She's doing, along with Sean the Steadfast, he's more like the apps in the background, right? You don't know what he's doing, but he's doing everything silently, quietly, and with yeoman service. So much power to them. And of course, the donors of Moats that keep the show / program going. Without their support, we wouldn't be here, and a lot of this wouldn't be possible. At least, most definitely for me, for myself. So I know time is always against us, as Morpheus said to Neo in my favorite film, The Matrix. So I'll just press right on to stating that it's interesting what is going on with that ship, because I was thinking about my former life as a street thug, and the punishments I had to endure in bullpen therapy. They why me pen, put you in the cage there. And they seem to be going through a lot of that. And where I made the connection was they're also committing crimes against humanity. Those bombs that they're firing off from their ships and those missiles they're shooting, you know, they're contributing to the deaths of the children and the slaughter of the innocents there. And, you know, it's only fitting that they're being treated as criminals by their own government. They're being shited on in a big way. And yes, as far as human beings go, there's some empathy to be had. The reality is they signed up for colonialism. And yeah, the poor, you know, the poor sign up to fight. And the poor gets used and the poor gets burned up. But the poor has to know in 2026 that when you're signing up for this sort of thing, you're signing up for crimes against humanity. On the upside, on the positive side, it's a negative promo. It's a negative advertisement. And I think their recruitment numbers are going to go into the dirt, if not disappear. They're going to have to bring back the draft where they were running around snatching people and kidnapping them. And good luck with some of the poor guys in the ghetto, poor people in the ghetto who are going to be firing off their guns and refusing drafts. So, you know, I'm looking at it both ways. And I just want to finish off by saying, you know, for you, Mr. G, but he's a jolly good fellow, for he's a jolly good fellow, for he's a jolly good fellow, that no one can deny, that no one can deny, that nobody can deny. Thank you very much, Boats, and I'll just listen now.
God bless you, Erobos, for characteristically beautiful contribution to bring the calls to a close. They're feeding Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell, the convicted child trafficker. They're feeding her 3 square meals a day, and a lot better meals than they're feeding their sailors, men and women, we now know, on board the USS Abraham Lincoln, bringing to an end the mother of all talk shows, except we've still got to hear from Gayatri. But before I leave that point, look, just donate a few dollars more, won't you, to help Erobos get back on his feet. You can scan the QR code right now. It'll take you to the right place. It's gone up by, oh my goodness, it's now £784 out of 3,000. Come on, don't let me down. Let's get to 3,000. It's not much, and it will ensure that we can hear from Erobos securely in future. Now, Gayatri is the woman without whom the news wouldn't be the news. Here's Gayatri. What's rattling, Gayatri?
So I too was very much impressed and felt very moved by visiting the old summer palace in Beijing today with you, which is locally known as the Yuan Park. And what was actually most memorable of the visiting this park, not only that this once was a treasure, as you so beautifully describe, holding ancient craft of thousands of years, all destroyed overnight. One of the buildings in this former palace was the Fang Wai Guan, and this was actually changed into a mosque to serve one of the imperial concubines so that she could attend religious services and learn Islamic teachings. Can you believe that? And we are to believe that China is very anti-Muslim and is committing a genocide in parts of its country. So moving on, but staying in Asia, because this is of course the week that in 1945 Japanese ultimately surrendered the World War, and that meant that the Japanese Empire in Asia fell. And immediately on the day, on the 15th of August, Korea was, of course, liberated. But then it went through much more horror in the Korean War, and it was split in two. And guess what happened this week? The South Korean leader, the president, he announced that he is ready for talks. He is open for talks and put an end to the long-running war with the North. So this is giant news if indeed true and indeed properly followed up. We have yet to hear the response from the North, but the fact that the South has announced this is incredible. I must say that this also happens in the week that in South Korea, the streets of Seoul were poured with rallies of those celebrating Liberation Day, waving the flag of South Korea and the United States. So there's a whole mixed bag going on there. Also, further down south to Asia, Indonesia, when as we attended the Independence Day of Indonesia, which was announced 2 days later on the 17th of August, as we attended the celebration at the embassy in Beijing, we of course learned of the devastating earthquake that happened in Flores to the east of Indonesia, which had a magnitude of 7.7 and so far 51 dead, but this is likely to climb. And so this is a very tragic news which occurred in the same weekend that Indonesia is supposed to celebrate its 81st Independence Day. In the same weekend, some weird images occurred all the way from the west of Indonesia, the tip of Indonesia, what is called Aceh. Now, Aceh has suffered a long civil war where the Free Aceh movement tried to gain independence. But this was settled 21 years ago. But this weekend, during the commemoration of this peace day in Aceh, suddenly they replaced the Indonesian flag with the Free Aceh movement flag, the Aceh flag. And this caused quite a provocation and caused quite unrest between the police and the local citizens. But what was most profound of this manifestation was that banners popped up saying, Aceh call for the world. Self-determination. We want to stand alone as a sovereign nation. I'm not translating, I'm reading what the banner said in English, in Aceh, in Indonesia. This is very peculiar. So it's a mixed bag going on in Asia.
It's entirely typical. All these color revolutions are announced in English. I remember seeing in Tbilisi, in Georgia, the exact same thing. People marching with banners in English. It happened in Hong Kong, as you very well know. They are look. If there's an attempt at an insurrection in the global South, a separatist military struggle, you can be sure the fingerprints of the United States Embassy are all over it. This is a message to Prabowo. It's a message to Indonesia to capitulate to the United States' anti-China policy. And the Straits of Malacca that you told us about some weeks ago, this is a threat against Indonesia. That's why the placards were in English, because if this is going to start again, you can be sure the United States is deeply involved in it. Don't you think?
Yes, it's just started, and there's lots of mixed reviews on it. But I can definitely say that this came as a surprise. But seeing those signs, it's what you said.
Thank you very much, Gayatri. Alas, there's no time, or we have many other things that we could have discussed this evening, but we've done our best to bring you the mother of all talk shows, and I hope that you enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed presenting it. Well, we'll be back, God willing, on Wednesday for the midweek show. Sometime now, in the next minutes, our special deep dive on weapons that changed the world with Larry Johnson will go live on Patreon. It'll be a day or so before the rest of you can see it. Good night.
It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows.
Go get 'em, George.